Hello and welcome to the Matthew Rocky Show for this week of May 16th. Thanks for tuning in for the podcast this week. We've got a lot of news to cover. Getting right into it, President Joe Biden invoked the Defense Production Act on Wednesday to accelerate the production of U.S.-made infant formula amid a nationwide shortage of this critical food and reports of infant deaths resulting from the shortage. In a statement published late Wednesday, the White House announced that the DPA would require infant formula manufacturers' ingredient suppliers to prioritize the needs of infant formula manufacturers before any other customers. In addition, the statement said that the Biden administration had also directed federal agencies to use commercial cargo aircraft to transport infant formula that meets U.S. health and safety standards to America in a newly launched operation called Operation Fly Formula. The announcement comes days after the Biden administration announced additional steps to address the nationwide infant formula shortage after Abbott Nutrition, the largest baby formula manufacturer in the country, initiated a recall campaign for several of its products due to bacterial contamination concerns. Most Americans want strict limits on when women may obtain abortions, according to a new poll conducted days after a leaked draft majority opinion indicated the Supreme Court is poised to strike down the Roe v. Wade decision. The poll comes as Americans await the Supreme Court's ruling on Dobbs v. Jackson's Women's Health Organization. The draft leaked on May 2nd indicates the court will use the Mississippi case to strike down Roe v. Wade, the seminal 1973 precedent that swept away state laws and made abortion legal across the country. The members of the Supreme Court are scheduled to meet for their weekly conference on May 19th, but it is unclear when the Dobbs ruling will be formally released. The poll of more than 1,000 likely 2022 general election voters was carried out from May 6th through May 8th. The poll is considered to have a margin of error of 2.99%. Despite widespread pro-abortion rights protests, including outside Supreme Court justices' homes, Americans have not rallied to the defense of the Roe ruling, the group that commissioned the poll suggests. Mark Meckler, president of the Convention of States Action, says, quote, "The left is pulling out all the stops in an attempt to create the perception that a majority of Americans support unrestricted abortion," unquote. Convention of States Action is leading an effort to have the states call for a new constitutional convention that would produce amendments which, if passed, would restrain the powers of the federal government. Meckler said in a statement, quote, "But as these numbers show, American voters, including more than a third of Democrats, have paid attention to the science of fetal development and support a variety of restrictions on abortion," unquote. According to the poll, 57.6% of the voters who participated in it believe that abortion should only be legal in certain circumstances. Amid the backlash against New Jersey's K-12 sex education standards, a Republican state senator is pushing a bill that would impose restrictions on how schools can teach about sexual orientation and gender identity. State Senator Edward Durr, a former trucker who unseated longtime Democrat career politician Steve Sweeney in last year's election on Monday, introduced the bill. The bill is similar to part of Florida's new education law, under which teachers are not allowed to discuss sexual orientation or gender identity in grades K through 3. The proposed New Jersey bill goes further than the Florida law to ban schools from teaching on those topics for students in grades K through 6. It also requires school districts to not teach students in grades 7 through 12 on such topics unless they have obtained written permission from the student's parent or guardian. Any student whose parent or guardian doesn't provide a written consent must be excused from the portion of the course without being punished or losing credits, the bill states. Border officials processed a record 260,450 illegal and inadmissible aliens during April, according to newly released Customs and Border Protection data. More than 202,000 illegal border crossers were apprehended by Border Patrol agents, while an additional 58,000 plus individuals presented themselves at ports of entry, 21,000 plus of whom were Ukrainians. The numbers are an increase of almost 68% over fiscal 2021 numbers, which was a record-breaking year on its own. The number of apprehensions is marked higher than any April on record, including the past 10 years, when apprehensions ranged as low as 11,000 in 2017 to last year when they hit 173,701. Border Patrol agents in Texas are the busiest, processing more than 128,000 arrests during April, which is an average of 4,260 per day. Along the whole southwest border, agents are apprehending an average of 6,700 illegal aliens per day. Officials in Scotland are investigating a mystery surge in deaths of newborn babies, the second time the phenomenon has been reported in about 6 months. The probe was started after 18 infants died in their first 4 weeks of life in March, which caused the mortality rate to surpass a set threshold and trigger an investigation. Public Health Scotland confirmed this to local media outlets. In September of 2021, 21 babies died in their first 4 weeks of life, similarly triggering the investigation. PHS appeared to rule out COVID-19 as a cause for the mysterious deaths, noting the infections in mothers or infants, quote, did not appear to have played a role, unquote. A spokeswoman for Scotland's government confirmed the investigations as well in statements, quote, we are working with PHS, the Scottish National Neonatal Network, and the Maternity and Children Quality Improvement Collaborative to understand any possible contributing factors to ensure we continue to improve the care of the smallest and sickest babies in Scotland, unquote. Louisiana public schools are closing the door to woke ideologies and social studies curricula and turning instead to American exceptionalism. Louisiana Superintendent of Education, Cade Brumley, said, quote, if you look throughout the course of human history, you see that we have always been on a quest for freedom, whether it was the signers of the Declaration of Independence or the abolishment of slavery, unquote. Brumley oversaw the process that led to the adoption of the Louisiana Department of Education's new social studies standards, which was approved by the Louisiana State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education in March of this year and will go into effect in 2023. Though content standards are supposed to be revised every 7 years, Brumley said they haven't been changed since 2011. The current standards made it difficult for students to look at history chronologically, Brumley said, with fourth graders learning about the American Revolution and then not studying the French Revolution until late in fifth grade. Because of this, better sequencing of content became one of the goals for the new standards, as well as the incorporation of multiple historical perspectives that told, quote, the whole story, unquote, he said. A U.S. federal judge has struck down a Tennessee law requiring establishments to notify patrons with signage that transgender people could use the restrooms of their choice. Under the opposed law, businesses were required to post signage featuring the words, quote, notice, this facility maintains a policy of allowing the use of restrooms by either biological sex, regardless of the designation on the restroom, unquote. The wording had to be in bold uppercase letters outside certain public bathrooms, locker rooms, and changing rooms, and also applied to public facilities on government-owned grounds. In defending the law in court, the state of Tennessee argued that the signs are merely factual. State Representative Tim Rudd, who sponsored the law, said it was needed to protect women and girls from possible sexual predators taking advantage of loose bathroom policies. However, U.S. District Judge Aletta Trauger said that there was no evidence provided in the court challenge for claims that there was a risk to sexual assault or rape, and no reason to think the signs would address such an alleged issue. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster on Monday signed a bill into law banning transgender students from playing in gender-based sports teams at schools and colleges, saying it was common sense that, quote, boys should play boys sports and girls should play girls sports, unquote. He also said, quote, the Save Women's Sports Act is now the law of the land in South Carolina. We have to do everything to protect the young men and women in our state who choose to pursue athletic competition, and that's why I proudly signed this bill into law yesterday, unquote. South Carolina's governor quietly signed the bill without ceremony, joining a dozen other mostly conservative states that have passed similar laws in the last couple of years. FBI agents tasked with analyzing claims about Donald Trump and Russia took less than a day to figure out that the data didn't support the allegations, one of the agents testified in federal court on May 17th. Agent Scott Hellman was part of the team that examined white papers and data on thumb drives handed in 2016 to FBI lawyer James Baker by Michael Sussman, an attorney who was representing the campaign of Hillary Clinton, Trump's rival for the presidency. On the first day of Sussman's trial for allegedly lying to the FBI when he said he wasn't bringing the information on behalf of a client, Hellman told the court that he and another agent took less than a day to ascertain that the information didn't support the allegations of Trump's business and Russia's Alpha Bank having a secret connection. Hellman said, quote, "I think the person who drafted the main white paper was suffering from a mental disability," unquote. Before filings in the Sussman case, the FBI's determination regarding the allegations were unclear. In one of the filings, special counsel John Durham said that the Bureau and the CIA had concluded that the allegations were, quote, "untrue and unsupported," unquote. He also said that the Bureau did not ultimately reach a conclusion regarding the data's accuracy or whether it might have been entirely or partially fabricated, but the CIA determined that in early 2017 that the data was not, quote, "technically plausible," and was, quote, "user-generated and not machine tool-generated," unquote. On the stand, Hellman said that when he got the thumb drives and white papers, he examined them to see if there was any hacking involved before doing a technical review to compare it with a narrative outlined in the primary paper. He called the methodology the paper's authors used questionable and said the claim of a secret back channel, quote, "just didn't make sense to us," unquote. A Michigan judge on May 17th suspended Michigan's abortion ban, ruling it is likely unconstitutional. The ban is not in effect, but could be soon if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. Michigan's 1931 ban violates rights to privacy, bodily integrity, and liberty, Planned Parenthood of Michigan and Dr. Sarah Wallace, an abortion provider, said in the lawsuit in April after the draft was leaked. Courts of Claims Judge Elizabeth Glacier agreed, writing in the new ruling that the state's constitution protects people's ability to refuse and obtain medical treatments, including abortion. Glacier said in a 27-page decision, quote, "From a constitutional standpoint, the right to obtain a safe medical treatment is indistinguishable from the right of a patient to refuse treatment. The law in question bans all abortions except to save the life of a woman carrying the child and makes those who perform abortions guilty of a felony." Glacier, a donor to Planned Parenthood, entered a preliminary injunction which blocks enforcement of the law until the merits of the case are decided. Nearly 43,000 people died on roads across the United States in 2021, hitting a 16-year high, according to federal officials in an estimate released on Tuesday. Last year, an estimated 42,915 people died in automotive accidents, up 10.5% over 2020's numbers. It's also the highest figure since 2005, according to data posted by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg said, quote, "We face a crisis on America's roadways that we must address together. With our National Roadway Safety Strategy and the President's bipartisan infrastructure law, we are taking critical steps to help reverse this devastating trend and save lives on our roadways," unquote. The NHTSA did not elaborate on why it suspects crashes in 2021 reached a 16-year high. However, the agency said that Americans drove about 325 billion miles last year, which is up 11.2% from 2020. There was 38,824 traffic fatalities in 2020, the first year of COVID-19, which was an increase from 36,555 in 2019. The highest areas with deaths included the states of Texas, California, and Florida. A federal judge on Monday ordered an Indiana school district that a transgender student at John R. Wooden Middle School in Martinsville must be allowed to use the boys' restroom. Judge Tanya Walton Pratt granted a preliminary injunction last month that gave the 13-year-old student the right to use restrooms within the middle school in association with a biological female student's new gender identity. The Metropolitan School District of Martinsville responded by appealing the ruling to the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, arguing that if Pratt's order were reversed on appeal, it, quote, would be disruptive of the school's operations and undermine the authority and order of the school, unquote. On Monday, the Obama-appointed judge rejected a request from the district to delay the enforcement of the April 27th ruling while it appealed, according to a U.S. District Court ruling document that was obtained by local TV. Individuals who protest outside private residences in the state of Florida will now face a fine or prison time under a new law signed by Governor Ron DeSantis. The Republican governor signed the bill known as HB 1571 shortly after protests erupted outside the homes of Supreme Court justices in the wake of the leaked majority draft opinion on Roe v. Wade. In a comment from DeSantis, he said, quote, sending unruly mobs to private residences, like we have seen with the angry crowds in front of the homes of Supreme Court justices, is inappropriate. This bill will provide protection to those living in residential communities, and I am glad to sign it into law, unquote. Specifically, the newly signed bill will allow law enforcement officials to issue a warning to any individual found, quote, picketing or protesting outside of a dwelling, unquote, with, quote, specified intent, unquote. Individuals who do not disperse from the residence after a warning has been issued may be arrested. The bill also makes residential picketing punishable as a second-degree misdemeanor. The law will take effect on October 1st. The increase in deaths not attributed to COVID-19 in the working age population during the summer and fall of last year affected white-collar workers more than blue and gray-collar employees, according to life insurance data. In the white-collar sector, mortality jumped 24% in the period covered by the data, April of 2021 to September of 2021. Less than 64% of those were attributed to COVID-19. Among blue-collar workers, mortality rose 19%, of which 80% was attributed to COVID-19. Prime age mortality was particularly elevated in the 12 months ending in October of 2021, where there was an excess death spike of more than 40% in ages 18 to 49 compared with the same period from 2018 to 2019 based on death certificate data from the CDC. The majority of the excess deaths were not attributed to COVID-19. A recent study by the Society of Actuaries, an international professional organization collaborating the CDC data, it relies on the survey group of term life insurance providers that yielded data on claims made from 2017 to 2021 and reported to insurers by September 30th of last year. And in our final note, Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts says that he intends to call for a special state legislative session to fully outlaw abortion if the Supreme Court does indeed overturn Roe v. Wade. The Republican governor said on May 15th, quote, Nebraska is a pro-life state. I believe life begins at conception, unquote. He continued, quote, Roe v. Wade, which is a horrible constitutional decision, gets overturned by the Supreme Court, which we're hopeful of here in Nebraska. We're going to take further steps to protect those preborn babies, unquote. Ricketts told CNN anchor Dana Bash that such statewide legislation should include cases of rape or incest. He said, quote, they're still babies, unquote. During the interview, Bash noted that unlike 13 other states, Nebraska does not have a post-Roe trigger law in place to automatically outlaw abortion. If Roe v. Wade falls, an effort to pass similar legislation in Nebraska failed by a vote of 31 to 15, 2 votes short of the 33-vote threshold to end the filibuster and force a vote. In 2010, Nebraska became the first state to ban abortions at 20 weeks of pregnancy or later, and the state outlawed a second trimester abortion procedure in 2020. Welcome back into the Matthew Rocky Show for this week of May 16th. We've got some notes from today in history to cover, and we're going to get started by going back to May 16th and the year 1866. Congress authorized minting of the first 5-cent piece, also known as the Shield nickel. 1939, also on the 16th, the federal government began its first food stamp program. That was in Rochester, New York. And then jumping to the 17th, a couple of notes. On May 17th, 1954, a unanimous U.S. Supreme Court handed down its Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka decision, which held that racially segregated public schools were inherently unequal and therefore unconstitutional. That note from 1954. Jumping to the 18th, two notes to mention. First of all, in 1863, the Siege of Vicksburg began during the Civil War, ending July 4th with a Union victory. And then in 1980, the Mount St. Helens volcano in Washington state exploded, leaving 57 people dead or missing. 1980, the date. And turning to the 19th, in 1943, in his second wartime address to the U.S. Congress, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill pledged his country's full support in the fight against Japan. And then in 1967, the Soviet Union ratified a treaty with the United States and Britain banning nuclear and other weapons from outer space, as well as celestial bodies such as the moon. The treaty entered into force in October of that year. And then finally for today is May 20th, and some notes from today going back to 1862. President Abraham Lincoln signed the Homestead Act, which was intended to encourage settlements west of the Mississippi River by making federal land available for farming. It was in 1916 the Saturday Evening Post published its first Norman Rockwell cover. In 1927, Charles Lindbergh took off from Roosevelt Field on Long Island, New York, aboard the Spirit of St. Louis on his historic solo flight to France. And then in 1932, Amelia Earhart took off from Newfoundland to become the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. However, because of weather and equipment problems, Earhart set down in Northern Ireland instead of her destination of France. There you go, some notes from history over this last week. And before we jump into the stories for this week, a couple of notes for you. First of all, do you know what happens if the average number of bullies at a school goes up? Well, the mean increases. Also, the toughest part about being vegan is keeping it to yourself. All right, getting into some of those stories. It isn't a big deal to hear about a 30-year-old wearing a fitness tracker to keep tabs on how much exercise they're getting. But in this case, it's a 30-year-old white rhino named Helen at Walt Disney World. Officials at the theme park say they've put a device on Helen to see how active she is on any given day. It monitors the number of steps and if those steps involve walking or running. It also monitors when she naps and what parts of the man-made savanna she prefers. It also is a part of a large research project to learn the best way to care for rhinos at facilities. That is quite unique. Never dreamed that we would have fitness trackers on animals, but I guess it makes sense. Well, going to a big league ball game can be exciting, but in this case, a fan going to a game had some real excitement before he even got to the ballpark. Eli Hughes says he was walking on a footbridge to a Detroit Tigers game when part of the bridge collapsed and he fell 15 feet to the ground below. Hughes says he was about 6 feet from traffic when he landed and dusted himself off, reported the incident to the police, and then went on his way to the game. The incident happened on May 9th, but the bridge was still open until the Detroit News asked state transportation officials about it Sunday. They said they weren't aware of the problem until the newspaper told them about it. That's a little bit concerning. A bridge collapses and no one realizes it until a week later. Definitely a little bit concerning there. A baby giraffe born with a defect has gotten a leg up on a chance to run around the zoo with other giraffe pals. Officials at the San Diego Zoo say the giraffe has an unusual disorder that causes her front limb to bend the wrong way, but experts in orthotics have gotten together to create a special set of braces for the giraffe. A doctor who helped make it says she wants to share a photo of the baby giraffe in her brace so the kids she treats will be inspired to wear theirs as well. That's the latest example of zoos turning to medical experts who treat humans to help animals with physical challenges. Two more stories jumping to Germany. What a catastrophe. Authorities in the southwest German town of Waldorf have ordered some cat owners to keep their pets indoors until the month of August to protect a rare bird during its breeding season. The decree is designed to help save the crested lark, which makes its nest on the ground and is therefore easy prey for feline hunters. The bird's population in Western Europe has been on the decline in recent decades. And finally, a couple in Tennessee were recently stunned to wake up and find a big, sweet, cuddly dog curled up next to them in bed. Well, a dog in bed is not necessarily all that shocking, but Jimmy Johnson was shocked to see it and rolled over to ask his wife, Julie, whose dog is this? The Johnsons have three large hounds who usually share their king-size bed with them, but this time the beige mystery dog was not their own. Once they realized the dog was no threat, the couple snapped some pictures and posted them on Facebook to find the owners. Julie Johnson wrote, quote, "Is this the weirdest post I ever have to make? Is this your dog? Question mark, unquote. According to an update posted by Julia later, the dog slipped away from her owners while on a walk just ahead of a thunderstorm. Apparently, she squeezed through the loose door at the Johnsons' home where she could find somewhere safe and warm to wait it out. The Johnsons' dog didn't even raise a fuss when she hopped in their bed. The dog was eventually reunited with her owners and has become a media superstar since." That is hilarious. Waking up and you find some dog that's not your own next to you. I mean, that's crazy. Not a story a lot of people will have the opportunity to tell. So that one's quite unusual. Well, the internet connection at my farm was really poor, so I've moved the modem to the barn, and now I've got stable Wi Fi. I also heard that they recently invented a telepathically controlled air freshener. I mean, it makes sense if you think about it. Well, that'll do it for the Matthew Rocky Show for this week of May 16th. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next time right here on the Matthew Rocky Show.